Today's First Pages Friday book from the Oosterhout Free Library features one of my favorite settings, the boarding school. They're usually mysterious, adventurous, at the very least, they're colorful. We'll find at least some of those things today in a book called The Winterborne Home for Vengeance and Valor by Allie Carter, published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. I'm Miss Melissa at the Oosterhout Free Library. Before we get to boarding school, we have a prologue, a visit to museum. I'm reading from my phone today because you can get this book right now on our free Cloud Library app, as well as on our shelves. Everybody knows what happened to the Winterbornes. That one day, 20 years ago, two perfect parents took their 5 perfect children out on their perfect boat for a day upon the water. Everybody knows that 12 hours later, only one Winterborne returned, bloody and bruised and clinging to the smoldering rubble, with absolutely no memory of that anything but perfect day. Everybody knows that the lone surviving Winterborne grew up with the finest chefs and governesses, that he had only the best tutors and wore only the nicest clothes, and was a charming boy with his mother's quick wit and his father's kind eyes. Everybody knows that the young Winterborne heir was destined for greatness, that, despite his tragic past, he had been born a prince and would surely, some day, become a king. Until the day when Gabriel Winterborne simply walked away from his perfect life, never to be seen again. Nobody knows the truth. The museum. And on the right, we have the young Gabriel Winterborne. April looked to her right, but it was just another painting, and a whole room full of paintings, none of which were all that impressive to April. After all, you can't eat oil-covered canvases. Or, well, you could, but April strongly suspected you probably shouldn't. You could burn them for firewood, of course. Maybe sell them down in Front Street to the old woman with the long white braids and the dog that looks like a fox. But there was no point in wondering what a painting like that might be worth. No one like April was ever going to own one. But that didn't stop the young woman in the burgundy blazer from looking up at the painting like it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Note how Gabriel clings to his father's hand. He was 10 when it was painted, and it's the last known painting of the Winterborne family. A month after it was finished, his whole family would be dead, and young Gabriel would be orphaned. Can you imagine? The docent said. But then she seemed to remember who she was talking to. She looked at the kids who filled the room. Some ran a little too fast. Some stood a little too still. All wore clothes that didn't quite fit, and they looked at those paintings as if they, too, were wondering how many meals one of them might buy. But the blazer lady just threw her shoulders back and raised her voice, shouting over the Johnson twins, who were arguing about which superhero's farts would smell the worst. Because they were in a fancy museum, they were on their best behavior. "Follow me, children, follow me!" The museum was super pretty, April had to admit, nicer than the group home, cleaner than the school that was only open 4 days a week because they couldn't afford to run the buses on the 5th day, which meant on the 5th day there was no free lunch, which meant that on the 5th day April usually had to be creative. But that was okay. Being creative kept April sharp, and besides, it wasn't going to last forever. As soon as her mom came back, everything would be okay. So April decided to enjoy the bright, clean rooms with the shiny wood floors and the tall windows. Even the air smelled fancy, fart debates aside. They were close to the ocean and the breeze was clean and fresh. April felt like maybe she'd climbed onto a spaceship that morning instead of a rusty school bus. It felt a lot like it brought her to another world. For reasons April couldn't quite pinpoint, she turned around and took one last look at the steel-gray eyes of the Winterbornes. "Hey, April," Girl Taylor whispered. Boy Taylor was on the other side of the room, joining in the fart discussion. So we have 2 people named Taylor, a girl and a boy. "I dare you to touch it." Girl Taylor pointed at the painting, crossed her arms, and tried to look tough. But April was very good at a number of things. Ignoring foolish dares happened to be one of them. "What's wrong?" Caitlin with a C asked. "Are you too chicken?" Caitlin with a K said, chiming in. "Nope," April told them. "Too smart." Okay, so we have 2 Caitlins with different spellings. April shouldn't have said that. She was always doing that, letting her inside thoughts become her outside words. It was one of the things she wasn't good at, and it made people like Girl Taylor and the C and the K Caitlin hate her even more than they already did. But April couldn't help the fact that she was different. Foster care was temporary for her, that her mother was coming back, probably any day now. You think you're so much better than us. Girl Taylor's hands were still crossed over her chest, and she was sticking out her lower lip. It was her tough girl stance, and April knew she was supposed to be intimidated. She just wasn't very good at that either. No, April said, trying to sound nice and sweet. It wasn't her fault she had the kind of face that looked mad unless she was smiling, and smiling for no reason made April's head hurt. I just know what that is. April pointed to the tiny sensor that was sticking out from behind the painting. Laser, she whispered, like that single word should be explanation enough. But judging from their expressions, it wasn't. It'll cut off any finger that touches it. No, it won't. Caitlin with the C's voice sounded sure, but her eyes lacked conviction. Of course it will, said April. That particular kind of laser burns at 1500 degrees. It has to cauterize the wound as it slices, because the museum can't risk getting blood all over everything. Yeah, Girl Taylor said. That's true. It wasn't true. I knew that. She totally didn't know that. April forced a smile. Of course you did. You probably saw the guards, too. Guard? Caitlin wasn't that impressed, and she made sure April knew it. But April pointed to the other side of the room. Yeah, one uniform. But that janitor has been cleaning whatever room we happen to be in since we got here, and she's wearing an earpiece identical to the guards. That part really was true. April didn't know how she noticed these things, or why. Sometimes she thought it must be because her mother was a world-famous art thief, or a spy, or a thriller writer. But whatever made April think the way she did must have come from nature. Her mother hadn't been around long enough for nurture to have had much effect. Yet, after all, her mother was coming back. Soon. Find out, maybe. Get this book on the Free Cloud Library app or on our shelves. I'll see you next time.